All right, well, good evening, everyone. I am calling the May 12th, 2022 School Committee meeting to order. The first thing on the agenda tonight is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I am excited to introduce two of our Thurston students who are in Westwood Boy Scout Troop 3. We have tonight with us Charlie Goodman, who the school committee has met previously, and Liam LaCroix. And they're going to lead us in the pledge, and then we're going to find out sort of what they've been doing and why they're here to do that tonight. All right, so we will follow your lead.
Please rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So Charlie and Liam are joined tonight by David Lamb, who is a teacher at Thurston Middle School. And there's a third Thurston student, Liam Hayes, who is part of this project but couldn't be here tonight. And they have been doing a project to help us identify flags that need to be retired and be replaced. And so we've asked them just to give us a 1-minute brief on how that work has gone.
So the general idea is that we were kind of looking over a lot of flags and in the school, and it seemed that a lot of them were not conforming to proper U.S. flag code. As Boy Scouts, we believe it is important to respect the flag. So we've taken up this initiative. We went through the school, looked over the different flags in the different rooms, analyzed which ones we thought needed to be replaced or which ones we could keep. A lot of them did have problems, stains, tears, rips. So we gathered those flags up. We took them out of the rooms, and the school ordered some new flags, and we have been bringing them around to classrooms and replacing them. William, would you?
And we'll be having a public Boy Scout meeting next week to properly retire the flags, and anyone is welcome to attend if they want to.
Yeah, it's typically our meetings are about. I start at 7. They go to 8:30. We will be doing a flag retirement ceremony for the flags that need to be replaced. The date is still pending a little bit, but Mr. Lamb will provide more information when we get it, and people can join if they would like to.
Fantastic. Thank you for that opportunity, and thank you very much for your service to the school committee. We appreciate both your noticing that there was an issue and then also being solution-oriented and taking the initiative to do something about that. So thank you so much. We appreciate that. Any questions from the committee?
No, just let us know the date. Let us know the date
Yeah.
and the time. Would be great.
Yep, we'll get the dates out as soon as we can. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, and I failed to recognize that Westwood Media Center is live streaming this meeting and also recording it for later viewing on its platforms. So tonight is the first school committee meeting following the annual town meeting, and so this is the meeting where the school committee reorganizes. And so in a moment I will entertain a motion to elect the new chair, but before I do that I will just ask the outgoing chair, Maya Plotkin, if you have any departing thoughts that you would like to share at the end of your tenure.
I do. So in preparation for this reorganization, I've been reflecting on the past year quite a bit. So we've had some really great moments. We've returned to full in-person learning. We've had continued recognition that Westwood is one of the highest achieving districts in Massachusetts. We've had school musicals. We've had art exhibits. We've had other wonderful performances. Sports were back in full force, and we even got a few championship titles. And it seemed that in a lot of ways, we were back to normal. But we also had challenges this year. As much as we wanted normality and to move past COVID issues, we were repeatedly hit with setbacks that challenged our way of doing business. And we never quite got to normal. We've also seen diverging viewpoints in our community about issues that feel fundamental to many of us, and issues that we also see playing out in national politics. And it seems that all of these factors, to me, have led to continued and maybe even increased frustration, anxiety, and division in our community. And I see this change in the way we're speaking to each other now, the way we're speaking about each other. the way we're communicating with each other or not communicating with each other, as the case may be. We seem to be leading with anger or leading with judgment more often than not, and forgetting that we all live together in one small town. We seem to forget that the same people that we rail about on social media could be next to us in line at Roach Brothers, or on the soccer field, or in a house of worship. I've seen the shift in dialogue firsthand, and I have to admit that it's troubled me. I'm honored to be a member of this committee. I see the tireless efforts of our administrators, our teachers, our staff, as they work incredibly hard to make our schools as strong as they can for our kids. But as a school committee member, I also have a vantage point that allows me to see both the frustrations of the parents and the challenges that the district has to manage each and every day. So I see how we got here to this moment where we want to express ourselves and our grievances, even if combatedness is the consequence. And honestly, even with the knowledge that this dual perspective gives me, I'm not exactly sure where we go from here. But at the very least, maybe we can all just stop for a moment and take a breath. My sister is a yoga instructor, and one of her favorite quotes is from Ram Dass, an author and a yogi guru. He says, "We are all just walking each other home." So maybe that's where we can start. Maybe when we speak to each other, whether it's on the playing field or in a school committee meeting or in an email to a principal or in a Facebook post, maybe we pretend that while we're having that conversation, we're doing it while we are walking each other home. And maybe for now, just that alone can be enough to begin to move away from the frustration and towards something better, something closer to the ideal definition of community. I don't know. But with that, I have to say that I am very much looking forward to the summer and also to the next school year. And I thank everyone, parents, administrators, faculty, and staff, for their continued patience and cooperation as we move toward both of those things. But before we get there, we do need to get back to business. So without further ado, I thank you for the opportunity to chair this committee for the past year, and I turn the meeting back over to Superintendent Parks.
Thank you. With that, I will entertain a motion for chair.
I'd like to nominate Charlie Donahue to be chair.
I second the nomination.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Congratulations, Mr. Donahue.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, I will turn the meeting over to you.
Well, first off, I would like to thank Mayor a little bit. This is something
Oh, thank
Keep you,
you. Wow.
Power. Could be said at the dinner table.
Yes. Thank you.
I just wanted to acknowledge that Mayor has done. Not only did we go through 2 years ago, where the school committee was asked to figure out a way to get teachers and kids back to school with no guidance, and we worked our way through it with Tony's help and outside people, and Mayor really kept us on the right on the target to do it. In the process, she's been chairman of the Hanlon New School Committee, which requires hundreds of hours of work behind the scenes to chair that committee, to take us through that process, to educate the town about what it was with many, many meetings, and to eventually get the town to vote and to support that. So it was unbelievable the amount of time she put into that, the work she put into that, in addition to being chairman of the school committee, dealing with all the COVID issues. So it was a tremendous accomplishment. I don't think there's anybody in the history of Westwood's schools that has had a chairperson with so many complications, and with Emily and the administrative staff being tremendous in supporting her. So I just want to thank you so much for an unusual time, and you did a tremendous job in it, and just want to thank you formally.
Thank you, Charlie.
Just a little. So I think we would also like to take a nomination for a co-chair.
I nominate Tony Mullen for vice chair.
Second.
Any comments on it? All those in favor?
Aye.
And I'd like to get a nomination for a clerk of the school committee.
I nominate Amanda Phillips for clerk.
I'll second.
Any comments? Vote. Who supports Amanda?
Aye.
Thank you, Amanda. So I think we, thank you again. Look forward to working with the committee. We've done a lot, I think, and I don't think we're out of the woods with regard to COVID and the rest. We have been gifted at the school committee meetings. We did have an eighth grader who wrote an award-winning book recently. We've had 2 state championship athletic teams, but tonight we'd like to acknowledge a wonderful contribution in the arts. And I want to thank Jim Howard, who has a lot to do with organizing things, setting it up. And there were 51 students who participated in the Mamma Mia production as cast, crew, and musicians. 47 other kids were involved in building the props, painting the props, and doing all that. And the Honor Society was there at the performance, selling tickets and doing all that kind of stuff. The rehearsals 5 days a week, beginning the winter break, Saturday mornings until they had the cast bowling tournament to break things up. 4 shows, sellouts for all of them, and I have to say, I thought it was at a Broadway production. It was so good. Tonight, sophomore Maddie McDaniels and junior Alex Mansour and Anna McCusker are going to give us a performance, give you a touch of the beauty of what they did. Anna's song tonight, "The Winner Takes It All," from the Mamma Mia Broadway show. In her video audition piece was for the Boston Pops. Anna was selected one of 20 finalists to go to Symphony Hall and to audition to sing with the Pops. So I just want to thank our students, the job you did, the wonderful performance, and thank you for joining us tonight.
All right.
Honey, honey, how he thrills me, honey, honey. Honey, honey, it nearly kills me, honey, honey. I heard about him before, I wanted to know some more, and now I know what they mean. He's a love machine, oh, he makes me dizzy. Honey, honey, how you thrill me, honey, honey. Honey, honey, it nearly killed me, honey, honey. I heard about you before, I wanted to know some more, and now I'm about to see what you mean to me.
There are those happy days, they seem so hard to find. I try to reach for you, but you have closed your mind. Whatever happened to our love? I wish I understood. It used to be so nice, it used to be so good. So when you're near me, darling, can't you hear me? SOS. And the love you gave me, nothing else can save me. SOS.
When you're gone, how can I even try to go on? When you're gone, though I try, how can I carry on? I don't wanna talk, 'cause it makes me feel sad, and I understand. You've come to shake my hand. I apologize if it makes you feel bad, seeing me so tense, no self-confidence. But you see, takes it all. The winner takes it all. The game is on again. A lover or a friend, a big thing or a small, the winner takes it all. The winner takes it all.
Mr. Howard was able to make it. That was fantastic.
We wanted to share this with the Westwood community because they couldn't tape it, the show itself. But it was a wonderful performance. It shows the talent of our kids, and it was moving to so many people who were there. So I want to thank them very much for coming and joining us. The end of the year in the transition events. Emily.
Okay. It is a tough act, too. Now, start talking business after that fantastic performance. So I have a couple of items for the superintendent's report. So yes, end of year transition events. We have 3 more weeks until graduation, believe it or not, and 5.5 weeks left in the school year. So we are in the process of helping students in grade 5 and grade 8 get ready to transition to a new school. So we have a parent orientation for folks who have rising 6th graders on May 26th. Mrs. Haberman, the assistant principal at the middle school, will be visiting each elementary school to say hello to 5th graders and talk about the transition to middle school. And then the 5th graders will visit the middle school on June 15th. Similarly, the 8th graders will visit the high school on June 14th. We have a new format for incoming 9th graders for the 9th grade orientation this year. So it's going to be a 2-day orientation on August 25th and 26th, just for 9th graders. The fall sports teams will be working around those dates so that all 9th graders can participate. And then beyond that, we have lots of fun and celebratory events happening. I think more than ever, we know the importance of these things. So elementary principals, I know, are sending out information to parents about field days and clap outs and moving up ceremonies and all those wonderful things. The middle school letter went out this morning to 8th grade families with information about what students and teachers and our fantastic PTO parents have planned. We have a couple of field trips, a field day with games and food and prizes, and then a moving up ceremony on June 21st on Flayhive Field. So a big thank you to all the people who make those things happen, right? It takes a bunch of volunteers and teachers, to get everything organized, and we really appreciate that. Last weekend, we had the junior-senior prom, and more on that in a second. We have senior week activities coming up, class night. Again, I think this is a lasting impact of pandemic changes. I don't think we're ever going to have class day again. We're doing class day at night with that drive-in format, which has been really fun. And then, of course, graduation on Sunday, June 5th. The tentative start time for graduation is 12 noon, but it may be adjusted depending, if there's rain or heat. And so Principal Davenport has said that by June 4th, I think prior to June 4th, she will let people know based on the forecast what the plan is. And then we have a whole slew of spring student performances coming up. If you enjoyed tonight, we have just, I think, 6 or 7 performances coming up with our musical groups. And there's a high school theater for young audiences performance of Winnie the Pooh in the high school courtyard in June for people who want to bring their young kids out. And of course, an array of spring athletic events. So the Boston Globe did a nice article a couple days ago on the girls lacrosse team's recent defeat of Franklin, who you may recall is the team that we went up against last July for the state championship, and they brought it home. So it's looking like another exciting spring is shaping up there.
That was the best high school sports event I've ever been to in my life.
right.
Maybe the best sports event I've ever been to.
Wow,
It was
okay.
In
That's huge.
In the rain.
pouring rain.
In the rain.
It was just awe-inspiring. So everybody mark your calendars.
That's right. Okay. So hopefully that will continue. So lots going on. And any questions about that before I go to the next? Okay, next I would like to introduce you to Steve Trask. So at our last school committee meeting, I told you that Steve has accepted the position of Director of Safety and Security for the district. And so I wanted you to be able to put a face to the name. And I've actually asked Steve if he could just talk for 1 or 2 minutes about sort of what he's been doing over the last month and the work. So Steve, I turn it over to you.
Good evening. So I'm Steve Trask. I come to you from the city of Framingham, where I spent a little over 33 years there in the police department. I retired as the chief of police in June of 2020, and I also spent 16 years as the city's emergency management director, simultaneously. I'm not that old. So for the first month, I've been visiting the district, visiting the principals in the buildings, getting to know the folks, and looking at their buildings and hearing their concerns. Going through the audit that was done in 2019 with a fine-tooth comb. Pretty good audit, a lot of stuff in there. And then just meeting some of the other folks. Had a fantastic meeting today with Chief Deckers of the fire department. Great guy, and I think we're going to work great together. And I've known Chief Silver for a long time, so there's no learning curve on that one. I would like to say that I feel very fortunate to be have the opportunity to work in this district. It's a wonderful district, and it's just a beautiful community, and it's a breath of fresh air, and I'm just happy to be here, and that's what we're doing. We hope that in the fall, I'll be very busy this summer. I hope in the fall we'll roll out some new revised plans, emergency response plans. We'll update those, revise those with the input of the district and the fire chief and the police chief, and we'll have those ready to go, and do some other upgrades, if you will, to some of the maintenance of the buildings. So that's what we're looking at.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve. We are thrilled to have you here.
Welcome.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Look forward to working with you. Thanks so much for coming out tonight, too, as well.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay. I also just wanted to announce, I know the committee is aware that we have hired Edward Walker as the next Dean of Students of Thurston Middle School. We're very excited to have Mr. Walker join us. He's currently a guidance counselor at Cambridge Rindge in Latin. He has a degree from Bates College and then went on to earn his master's in school psychology and counseling, and is also completing a program right now in school leadership. And he really, we feel very excited that we were able to land him and that he's interested in being here. The students who met with him shared some feedback with the hiring team, and some of the words that they used to describe him were amazing, open, chill, confident, empathetic, enthusiastic, friendly, committed, passionate, and the strengths that they identified in him were student advocacy, bringing a new perspective, talking to kids and listening, positive ideas for the school, liking to build relationships, and the feedback from the adults on the interview committee and also the different groups of people who had an opportunity to meet him was the same. So we're excited that he is joining us. We have a leadership retreat coming up for district administrators next week, and we hope he's going to be able to join us for that day and be part of our planning for next
The
year.
official start is what, July 1?
The dean position actually is September. It's a school year
Okay.
position.
It's
Yeah.
different, okay.
But I'm sure he will be working with us over the summer. Okay, and next, not as exciting as some of the other items. DESE, the Department of Education, is conducting a targeted district review of the district the week of May 23rd. This is part of DESE's accountability function. and frankly fulfills requirements that the state has to the federal government. So this it's not really about Westwood, it's just our turn in the rotation to go through this process. It's the Office of District Reviews and Monitoring, and here's how they describe it. They say that this process provides a district review that's designed to identify the systems, policies, and practices that drive the day-to-day work of the school district, as well as those factors that may help or hinder staff performance and ultimately student outcomes. Analysis of these systems, policies, and practices includes a focus on the ways in which the district works to improve and promote equity for underserved groups of students. So they will be here for the entire week. In preparation for the visit, the district supplied many, many documents that they requested and completed a self-assessment. During the visit, members of the visiting team will do classroom observations in every building in the district, and they will conduct focus groups with teachers and students and parents and administrators. Timing couldn't be worse, but it is what it is, and so we will cheerfully do that process. They have two versions of this review. There's a comprehensive review and there's a targeted review. So I guess a silver lining is we were selected for the targeted review. And so ours will focus on curriculum instruction and will not include the standards on governance and operations. So that's good news for the school committee. You're not getting reviewed on this one. So we'll see. I'm totally confident that we're going to do very well on this process. Okay, and then I do just want to take a minute because we had sent out some information to parents of fifth graders earlier in the week about a program that we have planned for fifth graders working with an organization called We the People. And we got some emails within like the last hour from a couple of parents with some concerns. And so I just want to acknowledge that we've received that information. And I wanted to say that in the conversations and planning that we've had with this organization, you know, we have a clear focus of what we want these workshops to be. And really, we want kids to be comfortable talking about race. I want to be clear that we would never want to create an environment where anyone feels guilty or shamed or blamed or attacked. That would be absolutely counter to what we're going for. Is very important to us. And this evening, some parents raised some concerns about a hashtag that was on a social media post. So I just want the community to know that we have already reached out to the organization to raise this question and to have a conversation to understand that post. I also want to say, as we've communicated to fifth grade parents, that we have created 4 opportunities for parents to experience the workshop firsthand and to ask questions of the presenters prior to any student programming. And so that information was in the letter to parents. There's a in-person morning, in-person evening, virtual morning, virtual evening. We really want to make sure people have access to this and that everything is fully transparent. So we encourage parents to participate in that. And we will create a feedback form for those parent workshops so that parents can let us know what they think of the program, and if they have any questions at that point. So wanted to
Emily,
share that.
if scheduling allows, could committee members partake in the parent piece of it, just to learn like what it's about, even if we don't have a
I think
fifth
that'd be
grader?
totally fine.
That's fine. Okay, cool.
Yeah, that'd be great, actually.
And this is a grant-funded program?
It is funded through our grant, yeah, through a grant, yeah. Okay, and then, let's see, I have too many papers here in front of me tonight.
COVID.
COVID.
I thought we were done with that.
That's the last one. Okay, thank you.
Blowing us back in.
We all thought we were done. It appears we are not. So, okay, the COVID update. We in the last week, Wednesday to Wednesday, we had 111 cases of COVID in the district. About 3/4 of those were students and about 1/4 were staff. Just to sort of provide a frame of reference, that number is similar to mid-January, which you remember was quite a time. So the week of January 13th to the 19th, that week we had 109 cases. So it's about on par. The prior week in January was our peak. We had 154 then. Some trends: for almost 2 weeks, we have been battling a significant cluster at Deerfield. I see that Mr. Bomber is wisely wearing a mask back there, where I think we reached about 20% of students and staff absent because they were positive with COVID. Mr. Bomber, in consultation with our COVID team, provided targeted communications to the Deerfield community about mitigation steps to try to break that cluster. Our pool test results at Deerfield today, we had 5 more positive pools there this morning. But overall, what we're noticing is that more people are returning from isolation than are now going out at Deerfield. So we think that net, that is trending in the right direction there. But, it has been hard. We have had classrooms, first grade classrooms where there were like 5 kids remaining with a substitute teacher, So it has been pretty disruptive. Similarly, and we've noticed it sort of goes through different schools. We've seen a big uptick at the high school this week. And Principal Davenport communicated with families, in part because the uptick at the high school is really impacting staffing. So we just have a lot of teachers who have COVID, or in some cases, their own children have COVID. So there's a lot going on. So first, I just want to thank everyone for persevering this week. It does seem to be getting better at the high school. Again, we think it's trending in the right direction, but these things are hard to predict. When we look at the staff who have been impacted this week, their 5 days of isolation, we think by Monday, those folks will be back, and we don't have as many people going out. I will say that Amy Davenport and I were on the phone at about 10 p.m. on Tuesday night looking at this situation because we kept getting more information about who was going to be out, and we looked at our options. And, there aren't a lot of options. One is to cancel school, which would involve then adding the days on at the end. With our seniors about to graduate, that would be very disruptive for all the senior activities and timelines.
And if you did that, would you cancel for the entire district?
And that is a logistical problem, that you really can't cancel at one school that way, because if we add, let's say that we canceled 3 days at the high school, added 3 days in June, that adds 3 days to our bus contract. And so there's a financial impact to that. Same thing with food service logistics. So we thought that the best thing to do would be to just keep going this week, understanding that there were, many kids who missed a class or 2 in a day. And I've gotten about 3 emails from parents who are concerned about the disruption to instruction, and it is disruptive. But I think we're going to get through this. One thing that I do think is interesting in terms of that parent feedback is there's concern that it's like at the high school we don't have substitute teachers when teachers are out. So teachers will post assignments to the Google Classroom. Students are expected to do that work. So I do just want to clarify that, there is, obviously it's been in the media, there's like a national shortage of substitute teachers, and that's certainly the case here. And we had trouble securing sufficient subs before whatever this is, the Great Resignation and whatnot. And so we did make a decision to go with building-based subs to provide certain coverage at the high school this year. And when we need daily subs, to deploy them to places like elementary or middle school where you have to have someone in the room, right? So that's where we put the resources. I don't think that it is really different from an instructional perspective. We all went to high school. When the substitute comes in, they aren't teaching AP Physics. They're putting the assignment on the board, and we're getting our work done, right? So that's the reality. That's that. I do think that there may be some kids who we would expect to come in who have been suggesting that they don't need to go in. And so I would just remind parents that it's really about first block and last block. And that other than that, we do have a system where we have a building-based sub who provides supervision while kids do their work.
So practically speaking,
Yeah.
if, let's say it's third block and I don't have a teacher, my teacher's absent.
You're supposed to be in school.
Right, and where do I go? Do I just go to my classroom, or do
The cafeteria, and they get an email every morning. Kids get an email telling them what to do.
And then so I go to the cafeteria and they take attendance at the
Yes.
cafeteria? And
Right.
so if I'm not there, it's absent?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Got
what it is. It's an absence from the class. Yeah. So, nothing about this situation is ideal, and we are working through it. I think some people have also commented that they think that the staff absence rates that this is what it's been all year, and I just have to say that's absolutely not not the case.
But 4 years ago,
Yeah.
if you had an absence in a similar situation, you didn't have someone teaching the same situation. You didn't have someone teaching AP Physics. You
No.
would get assigned something.
Right, I mean,
I guess
yes.
that's my point. Before COVID, it wasn't like we had in high school. We didn't have someone teaching, instructing.
We didn't, but
Okay.
we might have like a substitute teacher where you would sit in the classroom and they would provide supervision while you did the
Supervision,
work.
yes,
Yeah.
but not instruction.
No, not
Okay,
instruction.
right,
No,
okay.
never instruction.
Emily,
Yeah.
so obviously the high school is going through, their
Yeah.
challenges right now. What about the Thurston and the elementary schools? Has it been, like, are the building subs adequate? Is it not so much?
Oh,
Like,
the
how's that going?
subs, the building, I mean.
Coverage.
Coverage is always a problem, always. Yes, I will say that I think the next school on the horizon is the middle school. We're definitely seeing numbers going up at the middle school. On the other hand, we have a couple of elementaries that have no cases right now. And we don't know why there's the difference. You remember we had a big cluster at Sheehan 3 or 4 weeks ago. I don't remember when that was, and it just sort of was centered there. So we've been sending communications to families, and we're going to continue to implement mitigation measures in particular classrooms or buildings where we think we're seeing things, and communicate with people about that. And then, of course, in our weekly Wednesday dashboard email, we'll let the whole community know what's happening. We have been in touch with public health. They are not recommending anything else beyond what we're doing at this point. And so this is a strange juxtaposition, but I want to show you some prom photos, and I'll tell you why. Because prom was great, and it was a big event, and there does seem to be some correlation between the prom and the COVID uptick at the high school. I feel like we had some teachers who stepped up to chaperone, and for their trouble, this is what has happened. But we obviously went into it clear-eyed that having a large-scale event was maybe a little risky, but we really felt like it was so important for kids to have a prom experience that was like it used to be, right? The prom got canceled 2 years ago. Last year, we had kind of a pandemic-style prom. So this year, we did it up. And so they started with an actual promenade at the high school. This is Mr. Levine. He was the MC. I think he's the designated MC at the high school. He's got the right thing. And so kids were announced as they came down the red carpet where you can see families were waiting. And I think Mr. Levine had like a fun fact about people as they were coming down. Did he have things to say?
He was just very energetic.
As he always is. That's right. So people sort of lined up here. And, I just wanted to share this with you because what you're going to see is a lot of people smiling. I really thought the choice of dress was spectacular, so I wanted to put that up there. It was great.
Colors were phenomenal.
The colors were great.
Yeah.
And so people had a great time. And then the prom was at the stateroom in Boston.
That's where I had my wedding.
Right. I mean, this was really a spectacular event. And so there they were. It was a sit-down dinner. And there they are on the dance floor. Not a lot of social distancing there, but hey, they're having a good time. And then they had a photo booth set up, and so kids got to take these hilarious photos, and they made them into, the photographer did this. So there are all these photo booth things where you can see the originals and how it got made into these files that kids have access to. So anyway, I thought that as we talked about COVID, we should also talk about the joy, because I really think that that's what kids are going to remember about this week, is that event.
Yeah.
So thank you to all the people who made it possible, and specifically I want to thank the junior class officers. I wrote down their names and now I don't have them, but the junior class officers are the students who are in charge of planning the prom and organizing it all. And I mean, it was like a wedding. You can see that was a lot of effort.
Like my wedding.
And the two teachers who are the junior class advisors are Dana Proctor and Fritha Wright, and they did a lot of work to make this happen. And so I thank them and all the people who made it possible for that special event. And that is it for me.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much for.
Oh, sorry, and I forgot to say welcome, Dory. I'm sorry. Really, that should have been at the beginning of And
Thank
I
you.
saw you earlier today, so I
Yes.
think it wasn't in my mind, but welcome to the
Thank
committee.
you very much.
Thank you very much.
And you stuck with me for 3 more years.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Tony. Yes, I'm sorry.
You had to get that in.
I'd also
Not how
like
we think about
to thank somebody that's been very valuable to the committee over the past year as a student representative. So, Ruby, we have a little gift for you. Thank you for all of your advice and help.
Thank you.
And
That's so nice.
good luck at Bowdoin. Wonderful school.
Yeah.
Very proud of you.
Thanks, Ruby.
We now have a public comment period. We would like to invite anybody to come up for 3 minutes to offer their comments. We don't respond, but we are looking forward to input and advice from people for 3 minutes. And we also have what we now call an office hour, where some of the school committee members will meet and interact with people. We go back and forth, you get comments, we respond to that. The next one is going to be May 18th at 7 p.m. up in the district office on Hatton Street. So is there anybody here tonight who would like to participate in the public comment period? If so, come up to the microphone, give your name and address, and educate us. Looks like we have a slow night tonight. We have had a lot of comments in the past, though, so we've had our fill. Thank you. Next, we have the school committee chair update, liaison reports. I'd just like to give a couple of quick comments. Thanks to Marcia Uretsky, our third grade Fisher School History Program, 1868, is continuing. It is being done remotely in each individual third grade teacher's class. Marcia picked up 6 boxes of materials. If you want to look over here, all of the materials we use are over here, the quill pens, all of the different activities that the kids use. So we're keeping it alive thanks to her and the teachers, and they have also some YouTubes they can use for discussions. And I'd also like to just comment that the program we've had for 2 years before COVID, a Dale Carnegie course is being discussed. It may possibly come back to our school system where kids can take this course, which traditionally has been taken by college graduates. And I always like to point out that some of the top business people in the country figure this is how they train their engineers and other people to be able to speak and talk. And it's a huge opportunity, probably the only public high school in the country that is offering this. So we'll be announcing that sometime in the next few weeks. But it's a great opportunity for our kids. We've done it for 2 years. What I would like to also say is we are beginning our evaluation of Emily. We do this every year. So people with comments, teachers, parents, kids, would like your feedback and comments, and Mayor's going to take the lead in writing that evaluation. But this is a part of our process every year, and we get very valuable feedback in this process.
Charlie?
Yes.
Do you just mind if I just remind the school committee of the process?
Please do.
Okay. So, as Charlie mentioned, one of the most important things that we do as a school committee is to evaluate the superintendent. We'll be discussing the evaluation during our next meeting in June. And so in terms of the process, so as you recall, in the fall, Emily proposed goals and we approved them as a school committee. The goals are required in the following areas. There's a professional practice goal, a student learning goal, 2 district improvement goals. And Emily has been keeping us apprised of the progress toward those goals during the superintendent's report and presentations at school committee throughout the year. And in addition, I've also asked her to write up a self-assessment of progress towards those goals, so we'll be receiving that. So in addition to assessing the work she's done around those goals, the school committee also needs to provide her with feedback and a rating in 4 areas, and an overall rating as well, which is then submitted to the state. So the 4 areas are instructional leadership, management and operations, family and community engagement, and professional culture. So, as you know, we've all had the opportunity to hear from Emily throughout the year. As chair, I've also worked with her closely, but I think there's a lot of work that she does behind the scenes that we might not know about, which is why that self-assessment that she's going to provide will be valuable. So in advance of next June's meeting, I'm going to ask each member of the school committee to provide me with feedback and input that they'd like to provide regarding progress toward the goals, and I'll send an email out so you have the goals in front of you in each of those 4 areas. I'll then compile the feedback, and we will discuss the evaluation, as I said, at the June meeting. So clearly the 4 evaluation standards are pretty broad, and they encompass many facets of her work. So the feedback, I think, would probably be most useful as a growth process if we can focus our comments on a few accomplishments and priorities as opposed to sort of general, just so we can give constructive feedback. The Department of Education does provide a model rubric that describes each of the standards. I will forward that as well. So that's the process, and I'll remind you, if I don't hear from you, to give me your feedback. But again, the evaluation will be at the June meeting. So thank you, Charlie.
Thank you. Any questions on that review process or how it works? Okay. The school building project update, as you may know, we're well along, having taken the town vote to support the new Hanlon School with state money, which shocked everybody in other districts that West was getting any money. But it was because we had done so well to keep that Hanlon School alive. But we're now in the process of turning over. We've had a building planning committee, and now the town gets involved. The town has a permanent building committee, and so it's going to be the school building people working with them as we go through this. And I'd like to call on our expert, overburdened person, Mayor, who does about many of the jobs. He's been a wonderful job at it. Could you give us an update?
Sure. Thanks, Charlie. So as Charlie mentioned, we have officially combined the school building committee with the permanent building committee. Per the town charter, the permanent building committee is the entity that's authorized to construct municipal buildings. So the school building committee did not have that authority. So we've combined the two committees together. We are going to be holding joint meetings going forward. For May and June, the meetings will continue to be on Friday mornings at 8, but beginning in July, they're going to shift to the PBC meeting time, which is 5 o'clock on Wednesdays, on the second Wednesday of every month. In May and June, they will still be on Zoom. They will be recorded for later viewing. But as of July, it will be hopefully on Zoom, and hopefully if the governor extends that, they'll continue to be on Zoom, but they will not be recorded going forward. At this point in the process, we are going to be putting our bid package out. We expect to get bids back from general contractors in June, and we'll award the bid based on the public procurement process in June. Once that's done, the exciting stuff about the project is pretty much done. The design is pretty much set, and it just becomes a matter of moving through construction, approving invoices, reviewing budgets, reviewing schedules. So it's much more administrative work as opposed to the fun design stuff we've been doing for 2 years or 3 years. So again, just a reminder, starting in July, the meetings will be still on Zoom, hopefully. If not, they will be in person, but they will no longer be recorded. We're following the PBC's protocols for that. So
I mean, what would be an estimate of when they might break ground and when it might be open? Do we have rough ideas?
We are hoping to break ground this July. I think we will probably hold off on an official groundbreaking ceremony until September, when people come back from the Cape. But we do hope to break ground in July, and with fingers crossed, because as everybody knows, there's all kinds of supply chain issues and delays, and it's kind of crazy in the construction world right now. But fingers crossed, we will move the kids from Hanlon into the new school on the February break of 2024. And then at that point, the kids will be in the new school. We will demolish the old school and spend the next 6 months building the new fields and finalizing the site with a final completion date of August 2024. I'm really hoping we can stick to that schedule. It's a little bit aggressive given the current market conditions, but we're going to, Compass and Doran Whittier are going to do their best to get us there.
Thank you. Any questions on the school building project? Thank you. The next topic is the Policy Review Subcommittee. Amanda is chairperson of that committee, so.
It's riveting stuff. So the Section B comments were sent out in the packet, and I hope everybody likes the new format where Jim Hardy, our MASC rep, was kind enough to just note what changed, so you don't have to read through 80-plus pages. So, Tony, I did get your email, and the one thing I wanted to address is the question related, it's specifically, in the event the chair and vice are no longer members, senior member becomes pro tem. So the idea is if the chair and vice both, I don't know, up and quit or move simultaneously, the most senior person would step up and run the school committee.
Got
Does that
it.
make
Okay.
sense?
Okay, that makes sense. It just seems a strange scenario. It was
Yeah, I mean, it
it's
would
like one of these
probably never
constitutional
happen.
things that would never. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Right,
Okay.
so as long as
Designated survivor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just in general, like I trust you guys to do. I had very small minor comments like
Yep.
select board versus select men.
And that should be.
Yeah, but
all
is that the
for it.
best way to just email you if I
Yep,
see a
that's
few
great.
minor like editing? These
Yes.
are editing comments.
And
okay.
that, I do want to bring that up,
Yeah.
so I appreciate everybody taking
Yeah,
the time
yeah.
to edit and wordsmith. We have such expertise on this board, but I don't want everyone spending that much time.
Yeah.
Also, we want for all of the policies to be in line with the MASC policies, so if we wordsmith it too much, then they're not. So, but
Yeah.
all the things you noted made
Yeah.
sense, like
Yeah.
it should be select board.
I
You
guess my
missed
two
that.
things are things like that, and
Yeah.
the other thing is there's sometimes where it's like I read something and that's not how we do it. Like I read, like subcommittees, it said we appoint it once a year at this meeting.
Yeah.
And the reality is that's not how we do subcommittees, so I don't
Do it.
care which way we do it, but
Right.
if the way we do it isn't
Yeah.
actually unless there's a reason to have it, I guess my philosophy is, let's say what we actually do. Unless
Yeah.
there's a legal reason not to do it, I guess.
We should bring that back to
Yeah,
Jim and
bring it
ask
back to
that
Jim.
question.
And I
That's an
think
important one.
Yeah.
throughout the process, we did identify some areas for
Yeah.
improvement. And we've got the year that we're going through this before we adopt any of the
Got it.
policies.
Okay.
So operationally, we can kind of get everything in line.
Okay.
But yeah, I think we can bring that back to Jim
Okay.
for sure.
Because that's an example where we may need a subcommittee in January.
Right,
Right.
and we want to be able to just do
Yeah, we
that,
want
so
to be able
that's
to do
fine.
it.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then later on in the meeting, in the action items, we'll vote to approve Section A. So Section B is just, does anybody else have any comments on that?
I want to thank Amanda. This is have to be deep into the weeds, this work. It's hard to believe, but I think we have this fellow who, with the Mass
Right.
Association of School Committees, he's our consultant. This poor guy, he understands every tens of thousands of policies. So he looks at our policy, then he says, this is what they'd recommend, and we go through the detail. And Amanda and I offer our feedback as best we can, and Emily and Alice and others do too. But the last time it was 46 policies we went through, which probably takes 5 or 10 minutes to read back and forth. But Amanda hangs in there and keeps it going, and we somehow get out of there within 2 hours. So
Thank
thank you
Charlie.
for doing that. The other liaison reports. We have liaison committees, and this is the time when we update anybody. Any update reports? Okay. Moving on to discussion items. First of all is the social studies curriculum review. Allison?
Right, and now I think this is gonna be a little challenging because you all can't see the screen, so I don't know if anyone feels the need to like rotate around, you can.
Share the slides, that's better. Yeah, that
Share the
isn't
slides.
working for some
It's gonna
reason.
be like being in the really bad front row seats at the theater.
Can you share
I
the
mean, I can
slides?
I can share them with you.
That would be easier.
Oh, yeah. So if you have your device, you can just pull it up. Let's see. Okay, thank you. Okay, so you should have them coming to you.
Back to, great.
Yeah, got it.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to share this evening. I want to say, doing the social studies review over the arc of this past couple of years has been really interesting, in part because, social studies is really about kind of helping kids learn the skills they need as humans to interact with each other, to work and live and kind of make decisions together in society. And those are all areas where I think, the world has gone through a lot of sort of change and turmoil over the last couple of years, thanks to COVID and such. So I think it's been an interesting time for it. I want to thank the committee first and foremost. It was a large committee, and we had representation from teachers throughout the district, from administrators, parent rep. We had a student representative. Ruby did double duty for us over the past couple years. And this group, timeline-wise, started with us in the fall of 2020.
Sorry, I'm not running the slides
You
well.
really
I thought
aren't.
that might be my cue, but yes.
No, I'll let you know.
Okay.
It started back in 2020, and then we're gearing up for a meeting in March, and everything came to a grinding halt in March. The district was solely focused on, how do we provide education in the pandemic environment, shifted gears, and then it was the spring of 2021 when we got the band back together for a short series of meetings all right in a row to try and kind of push through the next phase. And then the leadership team did yeoman's work this fall in terms of taking all the information that was gathered and trying to sort of form it into recommendation format. So I really want to give a big shout out to Chris Hilton, to Catherine Stewart, and to Marcia Uretsky, who represent the different levels of work there. Now we're on to next. So I want to put this in context of both the wider process that we use and also kind of tell you a little bit about steps that are typical. So the social studies review exists in a review cycle, and for folks who've been on the committee for a few years, you remember we did English language arts fairly recently. We did science. In between those two, we had an SEL review, which was a little different because it wasn't a formal curriculum review, but looking more programmatically at what we were doing around SEL. We have wellness that's just about to wrap up, and sometime next year we'll launch both our library media and our digital literacy and computer science reviews, which feel very timely given the opening of the new school that we have coming up. Okay. During the review process, there are a lot of things that are very typical, and we tried to do as many of those typical things as we could, even under the circumstances of COVID. So we take a look at the framework and the standards and look at where are we aligned and where are there sort of issues or gaps. We have the committee just bring forward questions and concerns that they themselves had, or they feel like the people that they represent have, so that we can talk about those and look into how do we answer those questions and concerns. We do some work around creating a vision. What do we want social studies education to look like 5 years down the road? Because that's really a guiding light for us. How are we going to get to what students can and should be doing in their social studies? And that vision needs to be aligned with the overall mission of the district. We visited classes. We did these great K-12 learning walks where teams of educators went into elementary, middle, and high school classes to see social studies instruction happening all in the same day and get a sense of what does it look like at the different levels and in different classrooms. We did outreach to other districts. If somebody's got a great idea somewhere else, we are not about stealing it by a long shot. I think it's really important to learn from our colleagues elsewhere. And then finally, this year in particular, because of some shifts that happened in the framework, the Department of Ed was offering opportunities for leadership folks from throughout the Commonwealth to participate in sort of job-alike conversation around implementation, particularly around civics and civic education and the capstone projects that are in place now for 8th grade in the high school. So lots and lots of work during an already sort of strange year for folks. So, our vision statement, and I'll read this one out loud because I think it's worth doing that. It says, students in the Westwood Public Schools explore geography, history, economics, politics, and social movements in order to learn about the past, to make sense of the present, and to shape the future. They observe, ask questions, define problems, find information, and propose solutions. Students investigate primary and secondary source material, including texts, images, artifacts, and digital media. They recognize the importance of perspective as well as the impact of bias. And they seek varied sources of evidence in order to examine events and political systems from multiple points of view. They engage in civil discourse in order to share their thoughts and to understand the experiences, ideas, opinions, and to understand experiences, ideas, and opinions that differ from their own. Students participate actively in their communities, using what they have learned in social studies to advocate for change and preparing to become engaged citizens in a democratic society. That's kind of where we landed. That's what we're going for with social studies. I'm not loud enough. All right. Big picture themes that emerged from this review. You know, and these, I think you'll see when you see the recommendations in detail, kind of, a lot of them kind of shade back into this area here in one of these big buckets. So some of the basics were curriculum mapping and quality resources, really ensuring that we have good documentation of what the curriculum is supposed to look like at each level and each grade level. And what a curriculum map is really just all the units that are taught at any grade level kind of laid out by topic with kind of key questions that kids will be exploring, skills they'll be building, knowledge that we're expecting them to kind of accumulate and understand, and some understanding of what the assessment of all that's going to look like for each grade level. And what the maps do is allow us to make sure our curriculum is coherent, that it's aligned classroom to classroom, so whatever fourth grade you go into, you can kind of guarantee that kids are going to be having some comparable outcomes, and also that it builds grade level to grade level, so we don't have big gaps. The resources question came up a bunch of times, and I think it's really because our educators across the district, particularly in elementary school, but in a number of key grade levels, are spending a lot of time trying to find good stuff. Social studies resources are a tricky topic because it's hard to find things that are primary source but also accessible to students with different reading levels and different kind of learning needs. So investing in some really good backbone materials that every teacher has access to is a part of what we think we need to do better. Professional development came up as a big theme, and around a few key topics, really helping educators with their depth of understanding. And that kind of cuts differently depending on the level. So at the elementary level, our elementary teachers have incredible range of understanding, and we have history buffs and science buffs and folks at elementary, but not everybody is. So how do we make sure everybody's got the kind of core content knowledge they need? And they're not sort of falling back on what I learned when I was in school, right? At the secondary level, it's really about keeping current, keeping up to date, really making sure that, you know, research into history is something that keeps going, and research into psychology is something that keeps going. So we want to keep our secondary teachers up with what current scholars are doing. Strategies for differentiation is really about helping all kids find a toehold in the curriculum, making sure that we are presenting ideas and materials so that it's accessible to all of our students. And then tools and supports for discussion of politically charged topics. The reality is that the realm of social studies is about things that I think right now in particular feel hard, right? It's about people and their kind of systems of government and their systems of religion and their beliefs and their values and social movements. That's what social studies grapples with. And so we want to make sure our teachers feel kind of comfortable and capable navigating through that in a way that is fair, that is open, and that allows sort of students to have age-appropriate, thoughtful conversations and learning. And then finally, real-world issues and student choice. We want our kids to be really invested in social studies, and I think sometimes the experience is it's kind of polarized. We get kids who are like really into it and kids are like, ugh, you know, and we want everybody to be really into it. So thinking about how you do that, it's really finding opportunities for choice and finding things that are very meaningful in a real way for kids. All right. So these are going to say in detail kind of some of the finer points of what I just said. So I'll kind of gloss here instead of reading through bullet by bullet. And you have these in the kind of recommendations chart that I shared, but I wanted to just put them up today so you have a chance to sort of review them and look at them. And these district-wide perspectives are things that we'll be working on kind of globally throughout K-12. They're things that we know need work. You'll see some things where it's a little repetitive between the district and the level, and that's because sometimes our district version, we need to sort of dial in and put a finer point on the level version. So again, mapping, you see a real goal about diversification and expansion of the curriculum, opportunities for student choice. And this last one about interdisciplinary work, it's a way to make learning kind of interesting and meaningful is to look at where, instead of being in these different silos, projects kind of come together. The real world isn't divided up into social studies and science and math as neatly, and so we want opportunities for kids to grapple with those things together. The critical thing is doing that well takes planning time and support. It's not easy to do, so we want to help with that. Okay. Again, that issue around staying up to date in content knowledge, identifying curriculum texts that are foundational. This last one, number 7, engaging the wider community. For civic action projects to be authentic and real, it means they are going to be out in the community, and we feel like it's important to connect with community partners who may be helping support our students or helping to teach our students about how things work out there in the world. How does local government and state government work, and how do you get things done if you want to make a change?
Can I ask
Yeah.
a question? So in the themes, one of the things under professional development was supporting discussion of politically charged topics.
Yes.
Which I think is top of mind for everyone.
Of course.
I don't see that in the district goals, recommendations, that particular, I see, helping teachers stay up to date.
Yeah, I think where you'll see it specifically is at elementary in terms of conversations in classrooms, and it's sort of embedded in PD. I think that we're already doing a lot of the teacher training at the middle and high school right now, so that's
So
where
it wouldn't
there's
be
a
a
version of it.
change to what we're doing there, because I think that, especially at the high school level, I would think that's where you get, by the time, Ruby knows, by the time you get to high school, I know my son has very strong opinions on everything.
Yes.
And I think that navigating those conversations, but it sounds like they're already,
I think they are, but I think it's a recommendation worth. These are a draft form, so that's
Right.
partly why I'm here, right? I think if you have and Ruby can weigh in, and other folks can weigh in. Definitely, once this is sort of out in the world, we'll hear from folks, I'm sure. But I do think that that's work that's important to do well.
right, I just think adults have difficulty doing it, so.
Yes, agree.
I can speak from my own experience. The high school does a really great job, of teachers being mediators between students and their discussions.
Okay, great.
They have more practice, I think.
Yeah.
It's, okay. Did I miss middle school? I think I said-
Nope, just went to elementary next.
Oh, maybe, okay. Never mind then. Okay, I think you'll notice there are more and kind of more granular recommendations for elementary, because we think that's where a lot of the work is, actually, in response to this review, because it's the place where I think the curriculum is the least kind of coherent, in the sense that there might be pretty different things going on classroom to classroom right now. So investing in resources, which I talked about already. Thinking a little bit about these kind of experiential hands-on learning experiences. We've had trips out to Plymouth and Pawtuxet museums, to Lowell, places like that in class. Right here in our own backyard, we have the Fisher School experience. We want to hold on to those. We also want to be really thoughtful about how we're doing them, because we want to make sure every kid has a sort of toehold into that experience. Not every kid comes from a place like Westwood, Massachusetts, in terms of their own sort of family history and cultural background. So we need to work hard to think about how to make sure these things are relevant for all of our students, and that's important. We want to work on sort of content knowledge, and we have that up there. And then, again, sort of standards and alignment is a big theme in elementary. And here's where you see that. It's really, how do you navigate classroom discussions in a way, and we want people to navigate those discussions. We don't want to avoid talking about things because they're hard. I think if they're out there in the world, kids are going to notice them. They're going to bring them into class whether we want them to or not, right? And I think we do want them to. It's a good place to have conversations about things that matter. And I trust that our students are fully capable of navigating that. They are smart little kids. Finally, we'll want to update the report cards. Okay. At the middle school, you see sort of more focused and targeted work here around curriculum mapping, around resources, again, particularly in grades 6 and 7. The 8th grade, we invested when the big kind of switch happened with the state frameworks in resources related to the civics standards in the new framework through an organization called Primary Source that has really great, very robust stuff. But 6 and 7 is where the focus is. Speaking of 8th grade, that Civic Action Project, you know, we did kind of like a virtual version of it last year. They're working on one for this year, and we're looking to roll out even kind of more robust versions.
And that's the project that's required by the state, correct?
It is, and it's required twice, once at the middle school, and now it'll be at the high school as well. And the high school is actually building out a course. You know that the high school juniors, right, have a public speaking course, so we're kind of creating a partner course in social studies where the Civic Action Project goes, and so that kids' public speaking will be connected to the work that they do in social studies. Really great kind of idea that our high school department had kind of lobbied for in the budget process in terms of how we work that out. So we're excited.
Allison, just a quick question on that Civic Action Project.
Yes.
Could we get better informed about the one that was done?
Yes.
What the topic is? I know this started a few years ago, and some towns got it right away. And we looked at what other towns have done
Absolutely.
for projects, and just inform us at the middle and the high school level. Just be interesting to see what did they choose and how did they go about the projects.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, our students' projects kind of ran a range all over the gamut. And the ones last year, I think, were wide-ranging. You know, the outcome of their project was really kind of more of a presentation as opposed to anything more hands-on, because everybody was sort of stuck at home part of the time. But we're hoping people will be out in the community a little bit more this time.
But I just want to say that a key part of the Civic Action Project is that the topics, so to speak, are generated by students.
Right.
So individual students are determining the course of their project. We don't give them a topic,
No,
right?
no.
Yeah.
All right,
Next.
and then language, I think they're working on sort of, this is the kind of connection between the work kids do in their reading and writing class and social studies, making sure some of the writing skills that kids are developing in their writing class come across to social studies, but also that in terms of teaching social studies related skills that we kind of have a trajectory and common language. And then high school, some interesting stuff. So as I mentioned, the required course for the Civic Action Project. Again, the diversity question of the high school, and I think this is, if you look back at our program of studies from about 5 years ago, I think one of the things you'll note is that the world history courses in the past have been world history, but with a very strong focus on European history. And I think that the high school department is looking to expand that. The world is big and interesting, and there's a lot for students to learn. So they want to make sure we're really honoring the fact that there's a lot out there that's happened and worth exploring.
Just related to that one too.
Yes.
We did talk a little bit about the Great Decisions Program, the foreign policy institute develops a curriculum, 10 topics, which is now being taught in some high schools as a part of introducing kids into international relations. And it's a very well thought through. You read the article, and then you talk about it, and I just see that as a wonderful opportunity to deal with current international relations, which a lot of kids want to get into in the future in college, but a couple of schools that now have it as a course. Is an opportunity to take advantage of all the work that's been done by either doing it in the high school or doing it at the library also. Because I think it's a wonderful opportunity to expose kids to something that they don't get in the traditional European history.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the program, as I understand it, would kind of align with some of the goals and kind of purposes of the Model UN, for sure, but also, it may be replicative to a certain degree of our AP Gov class. AP Government does a lot of this work already, so it's definitely.
For her advice, because she looked into it, but she saw it.
Yeah.
Would it be an added or just repeating something else, or could it be a creative thing? So get your advice.
I know that in my AP Gov class, it's just U.S. government, but this year there was a lot of interest, particularly about, there's another AP course called AP Comparative Government and Politics, and that would have more of the international focus. And there was a lot of interest this year, so I'd be curious to see if like that interest continues, like enough to support like a new course.
That's interesting. We actually have taught AP comparative in the past, but not for a while.
Yeah.
So that's something we could think about. bringing
Absolutely.
back, Yeah.
Bring it back, or kind of a reconfigured. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's, if you look at number 4, develop additional options for engaging rigorous courses in social studies. I do want to speak to number 3, which is evaluation of course sequence. One of the things we talked about a little bit is that with the change in the standards, so 8th grade used to be a sort of full-blown U.S. history course. Right now is a civics course, so it focuses on kind of government and the foundations of government. There's history wrapped around it, but you lose a lot of history in there too, right? So focus on the political history, you lose parts of social history, military history, kind of other layers that I think, the state standards push some things down into 5th grade, but some things just don't belong in 5th grade either. So part of the look at the new course configuration would be to change the order up and have the civics class be followed by U.S. history earlier in kids' high school experience, so they get kind of back-to-back reinforcement. So you've learned about these government structures, here are those structures in the context of U.S. history, so it's a little bit more cohesive. That's one option I think the department's going to look seriously at.
So would you evaluate then the AP courses? Because I know AP US History is a course currently offered.
Absolutely. So there's a lot that would go into that. I think if you look in the kind of report I said, one of the appendixes, Mr. Hilton has kind of laid out a timeline of kind of what would it look like and what would it take to kind of go through this course reconfiguration. We want to be really thoughtful about that when folks tackled it with science and moving to bio first. It's a multi-year process to make sure we're covering that content and not making gaps for kids. Okay. I want to touch on legislative council outreach. So as we're sort of bringing this plane in for a landing, I heard a few weeks back from Ruby, actually, and the legislative council, which is the student government body at our high school, it's a representative student body, had been having conversations about curriculum on an ongoing basis, and I pulled away 2 themes, and I'm relying on Ruby to correct me if I'm missing big ones. I think one was broadly student input into decision-making about curriculum. Where's the opportunity for more student voice? And the other is the issue of representation within the curriculum, which kind of corresponds to the recommendation that you see here around diversification of topics and voices and perspectives. So the subcommittee of the Legislative Council brought their concerns to Principal Davenport and had an initial conversation with her. She said, you need to go see this other lady who does a lot of stuff with curriculum, and so they came to meet with me. They were an incredibly thoughtful and articulate group of people, as you would expect kids involved in student government to be. And we discussed a range of options, including sort of a student forum for conversation, some smaller group conversations like focus groups, and one student said, well, what about a survey, so we can get kind of wider opinion from more people. And we also talked about the possibility of more student representation on the review committees. So I think from that meeting, got some ideas for questions down for a survey, met again to sort of refine those questions and think about pushing out a survey to the student body. Given that we have this social studies review right now, it's an opportunity to gain more student feedback and really inform these recommendations, so they can either kind of confirm we're on the right track, maybe add, or help us to sort of revise what we're doing so that we're really listening to the kids. We have a meeting.
I like the idea of the student survey, and I'm a pain in the neck on this one, but I've often wondered if we surveyed kids who graduated 5 years ago and said, what were you well prepared for? We know that,
Yes.
right there. But what did other kids, what knowledge did they have that they saw in courses? Were there other things that other kids brought that they were better prepared to discuss? Just to learn from our graduates about what was good and what would they like to have better. And I think that could be another valuable source of information, because you run into kids who are way ahead of you on this or way ahead of you on that, or you're way ahead of them. And that valuable feedback, I think, would be helpful in addition to the students themselves who are here.
Indeed, absolutely. I mean, it's funny, I was on a Zoom call for a kind of conference yesterday, and one of the speakers on the call reminded me of, there's a saying, kind of nothing about us without us. It's a saying that I think has been kind of prominent in the disability advocacy community, right? And it's really about that idea of representation, and it's actually a very democratic, foundational idea in our kind of origin story as a nation, right? No taxation without representation. This notion that, if you're going to be a bunch of decision makers deciding what to do with resources, and you're doing that about us, then you need to listen to kind of who we are and what we have to say. So I'm looking forward to that. We're regrouping on Monday with the subcommittee and a few representatives from the social studies department. They have some additional thoughts that they want to kind of make sure we get into the survey, I think, and we'll see where it goes. I'm going to make sure I...
Yeah, I would just add that the Legislative Council also made it a big point to include Boston students as well in the discussions, because they have much different experiences than Westwood students usually do. And together we worked with Ms. Borchers to really try to make this as comprehensive and accessible as possible. The survey was, I think, one of our good things that we did.
That's good. And we're really hoping to get that out soon before the seniors all leave, because they have kind of interesting perspective. They've been through, just about 4 years of high school curriculum. So. All right. So I included a more comprehensive timeline, but I just wanted to put up on the screen some of the more immediate things that we'll get started working on. I do want to say some of our summer work, it's going to really depend, how far we get is going to depend on who we can get at the table. As I think Maya mentioned, it's been a long year, and I think our teachers are tired. They need a real vacation. And if folks are willing to show up and work on curriculum mapping, that is awesome. If we can do it, that's great. If we need to wait till the fall, we will. So those are a couple things happening.
Well, thank you very much for all that information.
This is kind of what's up next,
work you've been doing.
We've launched math, right?
Math is launched,
Okay.
actually. Tony is sitting on the math review,
right.
and thank you very much. It's exciting work, and we have surveys in development for that, actually a family survey as well as a student survey. And I wanted, if you'll note at the end here, the Department of Ed, who I sometimes complain about, sometimes comes up with really great things, and I actually think the social studies frameworks are a really well-written and pretty thoughtful document, and they have nice things to say about the purpose of what social studies education should be, and it's really this sort of skill set that helps us engage with each other and try and figure out how, as humans, we're going to live together peaceably. And that's worth something. So I think anything we can do to help kind of our kids, and I take it as a great sign that we have a legislative council that did this thing, because to me, that doesn't happen without kids learning about how to do that at some point along the way. So thank you to their parents, but also to the educators who helped get them there.
Thanks very much for all the time you put into this and involving the students, and that's extremely valuable. One of the thoughts I had on this, students participate actively in their communities to advocate for change. We live in a bigger community than Westwood, the greater Boston community.
Indeed.
And there's a lot of groups out there that they've developed the Affordable Health Care Act. They've developed the ban on pre-existing conditions.
Yeah.
They've community health, so I would think that if we maybe get some publicity to say who in the community have been doing things that the students could learn from, get involved in to do it. Because, there's maybe activism in Westwood, but in Boston, there's tremendous activism bringing about reform. And I think we may have connections in Westwood who would know people who could offer that. So just an idea if it might be worth seeking out people that would be very helpful and supportive of this. But thanks so much for all you're doing. Any other questions for this?
No, I thank you. I think the only other thing I would add, the civic stuff is great. Anything we can do, obviously we're involved, so anything going forward, anything the school committee do to support projects. And I met with a representative, I met with somebody, a senior at Falmouth actually, via Zoom, and she's actually working with her state legislators to get some start time legislation
Yeah.
through. But I was like, this is amazing. Things like that, anything we can do to connect people.
Absolutely.
We can obviously be more than helpful to help.
Absolutely. I mean, you all as kind of liaisons to
Yeah.
the wider community,
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
can be a critically helpful. And, we've seen a little bit of that through SIP in
Yeah.
the past. And this is more, it's less passion project and more like, how do you make an impact on your community and community defined either here or widely. So, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for
Thank you.
a great report.
Thank you.
Capital needs at the Sheehan School.
Yes. So I provided the committee with a somewhat lengthy memo
Yes.
about Sheehan. And so I won't recap the whole thing, but just, broad strokes. Obviously, we have significant capital needs at Sheehan, which we have discussed at length, and we have a very good handle on what those are because we have done, we've had multiple studies done. So just to remind folks, we thoroughly considered Sheehan as part of the feasibility study for the Hanlon-Deerfield project. The school committee knew going through that feasibility project that likely only 2 of our schools' needs would be solved for with that project. And so the committee commissioned a high-level design study for what we called the remainder school was going to be. When the decision was made to consolidate Hanlon and Deerfield, we knew it was Sheehan. We did a design study at Sheehan. We discussed the results of that study last spring. So we sort of have that. At that time, the committee laid out publicly a potential timeline, and I will just zoom in on this here, to undertake a Sheehan project. And the important thing here was this timeline really was the school department in consultation with designers, the people who did the study, saying like what would be possible and what would be within the capacity of the district to manage both a Hanlon-Deerfield project and a Sheehan project. So I say that to say that this timeline wasn't put out, it wasn't vetted through any process with the town or the community. This is really like, this could be a timeline in terms of our capacity. So, and we just sort of wanted to get a sense of like, how long would it take to do something here? And, excuse me, the study looked at base repair, renovation, addition, or new building, similar to what we did with the feasibility study here at Hanlon. What we realized was that the MSBA Statement of Interest, SOI, process was opening up, and that it was possible for us to apply for Sheehan to the MSBA last June, and that doing so and waiting to hear from them would in no way impact this timeline, right? We were kind of vamping anyway, so we might as well do it. So we threw in the SOI and threw in makes it sound like we didn't work on it. We worked hard on the SOI and we put it in to Sheehan, for Sheehan to the MSBA. We heard back from them in February, I think, that we were not accepted into the program, which was not surprising. We haven't even broken ground on Hanlon yet, which they very politely told us in the letter, right? They looked forward to working with us on Hanlon, I think was their line, noted. So the process is opened up again, and so this committee authorized our submitting another SOI for Sheehan again because might as well. So we resubmitted at the end of April, and so we should hear back from the MSBA in December about that. So we have sort of this iron in the fire, waiting to hear. Now, what is interesting is obviously it would be tremendous news to get in to that program in terms of the funding, right? There are real benefits to it. The MSBA process, we know, is thorough and deliberative. And so if we were accepted in December, we would go into eligibility. You remember that whole process. And then you get the vote for the feasibility, and then that's 24 months, right? So if we were working with the MSBA, the timeline would be longer, excuse me, longer than this timeline. It would probably push us out to 2028, right? But I do think the benefits of obviously reaping that grant would be significant. So there's that situation. In the meantime, we have a very clear understanding of the capital needs at Sheehan, and so we're trying to make careful decisions about what work to do at Sheehan while we sort through as a community what the timeline and the plan is for Sheehan. So Lemma and I and Tom Carey, the Director of Facilities, we really have taken the approach of saying, okay, obviously things that have to do with safety, we must make capital investments in that, clearly. There are some things that I would put in the category maybe of like comfort. And, we sort of pause and say, well, how much would we invest in those kinds of things if the timeline were a few years, right? Whereas we might decide to invest in it if the timeline was like 10 years, right? So we're weighing those kinds of decisions, looking at sort of return on investment and how long the building's still going to be there. And also, the very complicated thing is that there are specific rules about if a project exceeds a particular scope, either in terms of the amount of square footage, the percentage of the building that's impacted, or the percentage of the assessed value of the building, which is not that high at this point. If it's like more than 33% of the assessed value, it triggers basically the need to do a base repair, because you then have to bring everything into current code, you have to address the ADA things, right? And so there are projects that we simply can't do unless we're going all in on base repair, which we don't have any mechanism for doing right now, right? So these are the kinds of like lines that we are walking. So I do want you to know that we've decided that important next steps for Sheehan, we are paying attention to the roof and to lighting. The roof is obviously quite important, so we're always assessing our roofs on all of our buildings, I want to assure people, and we do that regularly. We're having a very thorough assessment done, like a more in-depth sort of engineering study with infrared everything of the Sheehan roof. Keep in mind, the Sheehan roof isn't one roof, it's how many sections? It's like 9 sections or something.
And then there are several flat roof sections.
Right, so when you read the roofing report, they will refer to roof 1 and roof 2, right? So it's that kind of thing, and you can be strategic. So we have a lot of information about that. We're waiting for this one last report, and then we're going to decide what to do about the roof. But I think we're going to have to invest some money in the roof. And it's important for us to know that about Sheehan, because that helps us prioritize our capital dollars, because there are other buildings that we would like to pay attention to as well. The other project has to do with lighting, and Tom Philbin, the town's energy manager, has gone after this very exciting grant funding that would do like a conversion of the lighting to LED. I think I'm characterizing this correctly. And I will say my initial reaction to that was kind of, well, how much will it cost to do that, and what's the return on that? Because it would be grant funded, in part, we would have to put about $50,000, I think, up front, 40, but the return on it in terms of the energy savings is about 3 years, so that seems reasonable. The more important thing, though, we think, is that one of the concerns that Sheehan has to do with the capacity of its electrical panel, it's very old, that infrastructure, and that converting to this more energy efficient lighting system would relieve some stress on the overall infrastructure. And what we're trying to do is keep the infrastructure going, right? And so we think that this is a good opportunity and an important thing. So those are the two things that we've identified immediately. And the bottom line here is that we think that really what needs to happen soon is that the school department and the town, I'm hoping, can return to a process that we had in place at one point, which was like a long-range facilities committee. Because I think we really, somewhat urgently, need clarity on the big picture of municipal projects and school projects, and to sort of understand where we're going to fall in that, because knowing what kind of timeline we're looking at will enable us to make decisions about what to do. So that was my summary of my memo. I don't know, Lemma, if there's anything else you think, okay. So that's sort of the situation.
I think that last point you made is critical. I think that when people ask me, what do I think about Sheehan versus what do I think about Hale versus what do I think about the fire station, I say, I'm on the school committee. Sheehan is first. But I say that because if I don't say Sheehan is first, I have no idea where Sheehan would be in that time frame. And so as an advocate for the schools, I'm putting Sheehan first. Now, I don't know necessarily if it makes sense to put Sheehan first, but because we don't have this townwide process, this long-range planning, it's, as you said, it's this, we're sort of siloed and we're sort of saying, okay, I want this, and another group might say, I want this, and another, so I think there's more interest now in the town to get this group up and running, and I would certainly be interested in being a part of that. But it's critical and that I think is the one thing that's holding us back on Sheehan, that we don't know where in the pipeline it is or where residents want it to be, right? Ultimately, it's up to residents to approve all of these projects, and we don't know what residents want. So I'm feeling a little hamstrung by that.
Yeah.
So I'm really hopeful that that process will be back up and running soon.
Yeah, I mean, there is a capacity issue about what a community can afford and run, right? And so those, and so I think we're just feeling like we need to sort of know what that plan is. And I will say that, in the long-range planning, the community really did commit that if we got into the MSBA process for Hanlon, that the school project would go to the top of the priority list. Like, that was sort of the deal. If you can get the funding, then everybody would get behind that priority, and that happened, and it was fantastic, and we obviously appreciate that. My assumption is, because as you know, to submit the SOI, the school committee had to approve it, and then the submission had to be authorized by the select board as well. And they have authorized both of our SOI submissions. And so my assumption is that if we got in, we would take a similar approach. But I don't know that we've really had that conversation, and so that feels important to get clear.
Yeah, I also don't think we're going to get in again.
I don't.
Not for a few years.
I'm not hugely hopeful on that either, but.
Having been through the process with them before, I mean, they're not laughing out loud, but, they say, who the hell are you people? You're one of the richest towns. We got cities out there that, poor cities, crumbling. So when we first looked at these reports, the thing that struck me was code violations. Okay, that's a pretty frightening word, when they say code violations. So I'd like to go back to that study that was done, and I think a lot of work can continue to be done on the school building for Hanlon, but I think if members of the school committee could start taking on this as a priority and dig in and start working on it, would be valuable. The second issue, coming from COVID, is ventilation. I mean, that's always been an issue. We can't open windows, so in addition to the lighting and what was mentioned about the roof, I think are we in bad shape relative to the futures of these health things with ventilation? But I go back to the code violations. Where are they? And start to educate the town. I think we have been generous to the other elementary schools in the last 10 years. Sheehan is the last that we haven't, and the middle school needs help too. But I think it would be well worth putting our collective expertise together, developing the case to bring before the town that this is a forgotten school that we need to support.
I want to clarify, and this may be obvious, but I feel like I should say it out loud, that the code violations are because the building was built in 1948 and the code was different, right? So I want to be clear, we're not,
They're not violations.
They're not violations.
They're grandfathered.
Yes, they're grandfathered, correct.
Right. They're not violations. It's just not up to current code.
It's not up to current
But it's
code.
not a violation. The schools are safe.
Yeah, and we did, it is an old HVAC system, but we somehow managed to do some work on it at the beginning of COVID, and we have MERV 13 filters, which is like, what you're going for, and operating at Sheehan. So, we've done some work on that. But I agree with you, Charlie. I mean, the window situation it's really tough at Sheehan. Those windows are old, and.
Is it worth
That's
setting
okay.
up like a subcommittee to start digging into this with Emily and to say, what can we do with the town, to educate the town on other priorities the town may have, to say this should be right up at the top of the list for the town, relative to other things that are being thought of. I think I'd like to, put some more energy into what can we propose as short-term, a 5-year plan, an 8-year plan, because I don't see money coming from the state in the near future for this, but what can we do for X amount of money in a 5 and a 10-year period? I'd love to have everybody, and then we go sell it to the rest of the town. I think we could do that, so.
So I think there is plans to restart the I guess you can maybe talk to Rob about that. I think there's plans to do a long-range planning. I mean, the other thing that goes without saying, the other piece that I think is important in the context of the town is, at least as one humble school committee member, I'm not making any vote to give away Deerfield until we know what we're doing in Sheehan. I mean, that's another thing we need to consider in the capital, because it does cost, even if the building is empty, there's gonna be costs, as you know, Lemma, there's gonna be costs involved in keeping that building empty.
Yeah.
And until we know if we're doing base repair, renovation, or new building,
Right.
Because it could be swing space for us. So
Right.
that's the other piece we have to, I think, talk to the town about is, at least for me, Deerfield, until we know those 3 options, I think Deerfield needs to stay within the school committee preview.
100%. And I think we've always said that Deerfield, we get that asked a lot, what happens to Deerfield? And we've always said, well, the potential is swing space for Sheehan.
Yeah.
So until we have a decision on Sheehan, 100% we should keep that.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Any more discussion on this topic? Emily, thanks for bringing this to our attention, and hopefully we can
Okay.
pick up and do something. The school committee meeting dates, which we were presented with, we get this every year, and I think what we've suggested is people could take a look at their calendars, and if there are problems with that, please let us know as soon as possible. But this is the proposed dates for our school committee meetings till June of 23rd, 23, so we just ask for your input, better now ahead of time than later.
The only thing that's a little bit strange on this is that the November meeting is on a Wednesday, because if it were on the Thursday, that Friday is Veterans Day, and thought people might,
They don't want to come to school committee the next.
I don't know, I thought people might have plans for the 3-day weekend or something, so we backed it up to Wednesday, but everything else is fairly typical, and you'll see what we've proposed here is to get back to sort of the pre-pandemic rhythm of not meeting regularly in the summer. The last 2, that's what used to happen. The last 2 summers, obviously, we've met a lot.
And maybe follow up, I haven't really honestly planned my whole summer out, but the August 4th, I know it's thrown out here, and usually we've had some, we can do that offline. I know if
Yeah,
that works
we
for
can,
everyone.
we can schedule that date. There's
It's my
probably.
birthday, so I would love to.
Yeah.
Not spend it with us.
Maybe usually we've done that a little offline.
I
that
require
one.
a cake
Yeah,
at my birthday
Yeah.
if we're gonna meet.
So I'll do that. I'll have
That
John
one-
get
that
some
one
things
usually-
around.
That's
for-
the only one that, other than that, I think they're fine.
Next topic is the school start time subcommittee. Thank you, Tony, for all the work you've been doing on this, and thank you for the update.
I need to turn around again.
Yeah, there's some slides. You can go, pick at me. Heckle me, heckle
I'm
me.
going to.
Pick or pick it.
I'll pick at you too.
Okay, so good. So, just wanted to spend a few minutes. I'll go through this relatively quickly. We'll make all the survey. We did 3 surveys, one of parents, one of students, and one of staff. We'll make those available probably by next week, the full survey results on the district's page for the start times. So just wanted to go through some selected data that I thought was interesting to the community and committee. The second piece is the subcommittee did develop some initial draft criteria on how we should start evaluating the choices. Just wanted to get the input of this committee on those criteria. And then I have a little bit of an update on the timeline and next steps. Superintendent and I discussed, as well as Lemma, just some slight adjustments on the timeline for making a decision. Okay? I want to start with this at all times, just as context for everyone in the community, why we're undertaking this. It's a lot of work to go through in thinking about start times, but it really is based on science and what the research indicates is best for children's mental, physical, and emotional health. I'm not going to go through all this, but I would just encourage residents in particular that have not yet viewed either the video, the Dr. Owen's presentation of about a month ago, or look at this. We have a bunch of research on our district website. Look at the research and just review it as well. I just encourage everyone that hasn't had a chance to do that. Second piece of context that those of you that have been in these meetings before will remember is, while I love our rankings on academics, unfortunately this is a ranking I'm not as happy about. on start times, and we actually we have the earliest start time of the high school among our athletic league. But more importantly, I think it's important is that actually a lot of these districts have moved start times over the last 5 years. So as opposed to 5 or 10 years ago, where athletics was a real barrier to actually moving start times, you can see a lot of our athletic league, 3 of them are around 8:30, 2 or 3 of them around 8:15, and a bunch of them at 8 o'clock, and there's a bunch more early. But a lot of the athletics has actually become, things have changed a bit over the last 5 years. So there's been a lot of movement here on start times. So that's just context before we get into the survey results. Okay. So again, it's just a selection of kind of, I think, key data that I just wanted to highlight for everyone. So we asked a question of parents around to what extent do you support later start times? And from this is a parent perspective, actually it was actually quite positive. You have 80% of parents either supporting or being neutral on kind of making changes to the secondary start times, which 80% is a pretty high percentage, I think, of any survey. Interestingly, though, if you look at the kind of breakdown, there's a higher percentage, I guess probably not surprisingly, higher percentage of either Westwood only, people that have children only in Westwood High School, or in Thurston and in the high school that support it, than kind of the elementary. That being said, even among the elementary, if you look at support to opposition, it's still a 2-to-1 number. So it's not like it's it's inverse, but I think it's I think there's not surprisingly a little bit of difference by grade level. So then we asked a question, again, kind of the part around education that I talked about at the beginning, around how are you familiar, are you with the research? Again, the way to look at this, I would say 59% of the population is either very familiar or familiar, 31% somewhat, and then 9% not familiar. Again, there's quite a bit of difference between the high school and middle school as well as the elementary. So I think there's, one of the, action steps is to help educate the entire community, not just parents that might have very sleepy 15-year-olds about the reality of the start times. But again, I think overall some good education, but I think a little more ways to go. All right, so the next ones I'm just going to quickly flip through, but there was basically, we asked some questions of high school parents, then questions of middle school parents, then questions of elementary parents. They were slightly different, but we put out some scenarios. The way to look at this was the high school parents, and we asked them on the left-hand side, what was the, if the school started at 8:10 and ended at 2:50, how positive was that for the morning and afternoon routines? And then we threw out kind of on the other extreme, the 9 o'clock start and 3:40 p.m., how was the impact in the afternoon routines? I mean, the 8:10 was, you can see very high positives. So that would be 45 minutes later than we start today. So very positive, I think, results. If you get as far as 9 o'clock, actually, it wasn't actually, there was kind of a mix of probably 50-50 between positive and neutral. But again, not a much more, as you get to that 9 o'clock, that extreme, that was, I think, a little bit too far, at least for most people.
Late.
It does seem that. I'm just going, but we did do, as when I talked about, we did do pretty big extremes. So, it seemed like we'll see the middle school, it seemed like everyone wants to basically go to school at 8:50 and 8:30 across all grade levels. If I had to say that.
All the buses in it.
Yes, of course. But the same thing, we did slightly different times at the middle school. We said basically 8:30, again, very positive generally, and then we said again, I think 9 o'clock. Not so positive. But again, so everyone wants to start. I mean, I guess there is something around this. Some degree of change, 8:15, 8:30, seems generally but as you get too far, I guess, at least according to parents, that it seems a little too far. But I think it was good to, go on, not saying we're going to 9 o'clock, but it was good to kind of go and see some of these differences.
Tony, I think that makes sense, right, with most parents starting work at 9.
Right.
So they'd like to have their kids out of the house, right, whether they're working on Zoom or driving.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think, yes, and that came up a lot, and we'll get that in a minute. Particularly elementary parents, I think work schedules, I mean, it matters for high school parents, but I think particularly for elementary parents,
Exactly.
it's even more important. And this was, so elementary, we asked a tad different question. So this was actually, so we did have some questions. I should also say, we had all sorts of other questions on busing and so forth. There were some slight changes in busing that we'll need to analyze. Elementary parents, we asked a little bit different, which is around, kind of childcare needs. And so this is kind of around, would you need something in the morning? Would you need something in the afternoon? And I don't know the exact number of what percentage use it. What percentage use extended day currently? Do you know offhand?
Almost
So it's almost 50 hours. So just as context, we almost have 50% of elementary already in extended day, so it indicates there might be a little bit of bump, which we wouldn't be surprised at. But it wasn't like it was, I mean, there's still some people I don't know. It wasn't like it went to 90%. So there'll probably be a little bit of bump in needs for a particular after-school extended day, which isn't surprising if you moved it earlier. And these were more things from the comments. If you look through the comments, I would say the two comments that came out among elementary parents was, of course, impact on childcare, particularly if you moved the elementary start times earlier, you know, the impact in the afternoons, as well as just generally impact on work schedules. That was, you know, kind of, I guess, that was a comment for everyone, but I think particularly for elementary parents, not surprisingly. And then we also had a data, we did do a student survey, and we had a lot of data. I'm just going to share a subset of that as well. So we asked a similar question around how familiar were they with research, and you can see the results there. I guess 58% more or less were familiar. Interestingly, as far as if they were supportive or not, I guess it was much more actually less supportive than parents. So it was kind of a mix, I would say. You know, it was.
I don't understand that.
Well, okay.
Ruby, what is going on?
I think that, I don't know, when we were talking at a subcommittee meeting for legislative council once, Boston students came in and they raised some really good points about why it shouldn't be moved, like traffic patterns and walking home in the dark. And then I think also kids are just used to the schedule at this point. Like this survey was taken later in the year, especially for like the freshmen too. And like you just become accustomed to what you know. So maybe that's it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, we did ask this question about why what the reasons makes most sense to you for why you shouldn't start later. I mean, the number one, actually, I was a little surprised, but the number one was actually after-school jobs. And now that was at least, not that was universal, but it wasn't. I thought it was going to be more sports. There was some sports and activities. I think it was up there somewhere. But actually, number one was jobs, which I thought was a little bit interesting. You know, that people see it, you know, you start going an hour later, you start working an hour later. And I think there were some comments around activities when I looked at the comments, you know, you push the activities forward. And here's my funnest data I like the most. All right, so we did ask questions around the sleep patterns of our students. So this is actually, we asked a question, what time you go to bed? And actually, this 10 to 11 and 11 to 12 is actually what mirrors most of the research. Is basically, the experts say an average teenager falls asleep like at 11 o'clock, which actually, it's a pretty perfect distribution of what you might actually expect. So some going to 10 to 11. The other interesting part of this is actually when other districts that have done this and they've researched it, when they do this again, let's say a year after they do the start times, generally they actually find this doesn't change that much. The time that people go to bed doesn't change what happens, but if you extend out, that's the theory, if you extend out an hour, they can wake up later. That this is kind of just the natural time, because that's kind of one thing you hear in the feedback, is like, oh, kids will just stay up an hour later. Generally, actually, most of the research shows that this will not change. We'll see in 2 years, hopefully, but that's the hope. The other piece that was interesting, I know the superintendent's very interested in, is the amount of napping that goes among
I was unaware that was a phenomenon, but I support it and wish I could do it. Right. So, yeah.
So this is how often our high school students nap. You see about a third of them nap either day. They are very frequently, a few times a week, then probably a third of them about equal occasion, then a third of them never. But that being said, I mean, you look at the amount of time, the people that are nappers, and we're talking about an hour, 2 hours. I mean, this is not, you know, so to some extent. Yeah, exactly. So some of these children are really tired, I guess, is the part. And so, so I don't know. So I did find that, I mean, I don't know, it just was interesting to see that, you know, some of them are making up for lost sleep by coming home at 3 o'clock and sleeping for more than 2 hours, 30% of there.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway.
But then don't you have enough sleep pressure to fall asleep? Like, you need to be tired enough to fall asleep at 9 if you're taking a 2-hour nap.
Maybe those are the folks, right?
Yeah.
Well, they am after 12.
Actually, it is a pretty close
about
number.
this.
Yeah.
We could do a cross section. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
You could look at the data like that. I don't know. Steve's like, no, I'm not doing any more cuts. No more cuts. Anyway, so I did think that was kind of interesting, just data. All right, so just conclusions. So look, I think overall there was a high level of support from parents. I think actually it was, you know, higher than I think I initially expected, which is great. I did talk about the kind of 8:10, 8:30. I think 9 o'clock seems too late. Just data to be kind of subs. I think there's continued need. I think we continue to reinforce the research, because I think it's just a learning process. We talked about it a lot here, but I think the more we can educate the community and also actually the staff as well will be helpful. I think, we talked about the concern, if we did go with the model where you flip the times, that I think raises a lot of childcare concerns as well as parent schedules. This fifth bullet, there's a lot of work, and we'll talk about the timing. There's a lot of work to be looking at the busing and the traffic patterns, and we've got a consultant that's going to help us with that. But that's a lot of work that I think we need to do. And then the students' kind of concerns as well was kind of noted. So that's the data. I'm going to pause there before we talk about the criteria. Any observations or comments or questions?
One question.
Yeah.
To the point Ruby made, were the Boston families included in the elementary survey? They were. Okay.
Oh, in the elementary
Well,
survey.
in the high school they were.
Probably not, no.
They wouldn't be in the elementary.
Yeah. Although when we met, so we went, a group of us went to METCO HQ 2 weeks ago, I think, and met with incoming elementary parents. And that did come up. We talked about start times and the possibility of things shifting.
Yeah, it came up when we were welcoming them in. It came up. Actually, the kids were wondering how they got to school, and it sparked the parents. Oh, what time does school start? Is there a before-school program? And
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the next one, so this is some criteria the subcommittee came up with a few weeks ago. Would love the group's input on. As we think about options and start evaluating them, I mean, one, it goes without saying, kind of the, how much additional sleep or the well-being we can get is kind of, one criteria. We should evaluate the different options for changing start times. Cost, if there was additional cost, which would probably be more around if we had to do anything on busing in particular, that's the second criteria. The third criteria was around the impact of kind of parent schedules, particularly childcare. Fourth was kind of this after-school impact, which I think is particularly around work schedules and/or athletics, particularly at the high school. This fifth one is Mr. Redmond's favorite one. This one is around aligning. If you align the third. Okay, this is that. Basically, my understanding is you aligned kind of the schedules like 25 minutes apart between Thurston and the high school. It would allow opportunities for like teachers to co-share and actually students who might be advanced in a subject to go. So it provides some good alignment between the Thurston and the high school. And then sixth one is just kind of level of disruption or change, which is kind of a generic piece. But let me pause, see if there's other criteria you think we should be thinking about.
The only thing I would say is like the safety, it was mentioned briefly, but like the percentage of students that would be potentially walking in the dark.
The dark, yes. Okay, good point. Yeah. And you can think about it if you have other thoughts. I mean, this is. Okay. And then finally, all right, so then let's talk a little bit about timing. We've made some tweaks here based on, I think, some conversations Superintendent and Lemon and I have had. So in the next few weeks, we're going to send out just kind of an update to the community with kind of an update with the survey results. We're working on an FAQ document, as well as just providing them an update on timing, so that we'll do that in the next few weeks. Our thought, though, originally we had talked about kind of trying to make a decision by June. I think given where we are in the calendar, and particularly given we need to do some more work, I think, on busing and understanding the traffic impacts, we need a little bit more time through the summer to work through that. So our proposal is still to stick to kind of the implementation being the fall of 2023 for any change, but to kind of spend a little bit of time in the fall to engage the community a little bit more on some of the changes, and then at the October meeting in the fall to actually make a decision around any changes. That'll give us some time, I think, to do some work, particularly on the traffic, as well as the traffic on buses. And then I think the thought is we'll have a community-wide forum in September when people are back fresh, hopefully from the restful summer, to kind of engage more on the options and get some input there, and then hopefully at the October meeting make a proposal. And I think the other advantage of doing it, if we do it by October, any budget implications we can incorporate in the budget for the following fiscal year. But I just wanted to run that, because that's a bit of a shift in what we've talked about before, but just wanted to make sure everyone was aligned on that as well.
Sounds good.
Tony, thanks very much.
Any
Any
other questions,
questions further for Tony? Thank you and the committee for all the work you've been doing on this. We're now moving into action items, okay? Approval of Section A, which you received last meeting. This basically means we're simply doing a temporary action on it. It's an approval you got last week. We've talked to some of you, but in about another year, when we look at the whole thing, that's when we take a formal vote. So all we're saying is, we're expected every month to give an approval, that we've looked at it, we've talked to each other, but when all of these, I think these tenant sections get together, we're gonna formally then vote. Is that correct, Amanda, do you think?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So we're voting to approve each section, and then when we're done, we'll vote to adopt all of the policies.
So could I have a motion to approve the first group, which is another number called A, that we gave out last week, as a part of the process, which we will not do formal approval till they're all in.
So Section A was given out a month ago. Section B was given out this past week.
We'll do Section B next meeting.
Yes, yep. So just.
So
we're just
Section
voting
A,
on
which we
Section
gave
A.
out last month, we're looking for
So
what they,
moved to approve of section A.
they call it approval.
So moved to approve section
Second.
A.
A second?
Policies.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Annual vote on school choice.
Yeah.
That's something we do every year. It's, maybe Emily can give the background, but we've always approved this.
Well, so to be clear, so what has happened, this is an annual vote that the school committee takes around whether or not to participate in school choice where people could opt in to coming to Westwood. And so historically, the Westwood School Committee has declined to participate. And so it's like the double negative. So the school choice vote, there's actual language here. It's you know, like a resolution. And so somebody does have to read it into the record. And so a vote of yes declines to participate in school choice. If you voted no on this resolution, you would be saying you do want to participate in school choice.
Okay.
Yes.
I would like to make a motion.
Okay.
Whereas the Educational Reform Act of 1993 requires that the enrollment of non-resident students under the school choice provision, unless the committee votes by June 1st not to participate, and whereas the school choice provision reallocates funds from the sending district and awards such funds to the receiving district, and whereas the maximum reimbursement allowed by the school choice provision is less than Westwood's per pupil expenditure, which means Westwood Public Schools would be required to subsidize each choice student, and whereas once Westwood accepts a choice student, Westwood must keep such student through graduation regardless of whether Westwood's demographic situation has changed. And whereas it is likely that a number of students will return to their sending districts or otherwise leave Westwood, thus creating a potential income loss. Now hereby be it resolved that the Westwood School Committee respectfully declines to participate in the school choice program, provided, however, that if surrounding school districts subsequently and prior to June 1 decide to accept the provisions of school choice, the Westwood School Committee reserves the right to do likewise in order to protect its fiduciary interests in this matter.
This has to be a roll call vote.
So, second, anybody want to second that motion?
Second.
And again, the yes means we are going to do what we've done in the past, which is not accept this. Those in favor of yes?
I think you have to do a roll
You
call.
gotta do a
Oh,
roll call on this one,
okay.
yeah.
Mayor? Mayor?
Oh, yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
Buddy?
Yes.
Okay, yes. You know, in the past, we've had, some discussions, but we do bring in 100 Metco students. We are reaching out to students in other areas to bring into Westwood system. So I don't think people who feel we're being unfair to who might want to take part in that program. We now have a series of voter ratification, the Westwood Teacher Association collective bargaining agreement.
So actually, we need to table this. They had a technical administrative problem with their ballot process, not with the vote itself. And so we don't have their ratification vote yet, and the school committee typically waits for the WTA first to take their ratification vote. And so I think we just need to table this until our June meeting, but
It's okay next to June?
it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can ratify it in June. Yeah.
Okay, next is a grant from the Special Olympics of Massachusetts. We have to vote to accept the gifts. And I think we send thank you notes, we don't to all
We
these?
do,
Yeah,
yes, we
okay,
do.
so the grant from the Special Olympics of Massachusetts, do I hear a motion to approve
So moved.
accepting that grant? Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
A gift from the American Heart Association. Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
A grant from the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office. vote to, a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Aye.
Second. Favor? Aye.
Aye.
The Westwood Environmental Action Committee, a gift. Vote to approve receiving the gift?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Say aye.
I just want to say that that's to plant a memorial tree in honor of Otis, the departed therapy dog.
the
So,
dog.
yes, I mean,
That's so thoughtful.
it's very nice, yes. I think at the high school, they're planting, yes, a tree in his honor.
Do we have another dog coming in?
We have a new dog, he's already arrived, Bert.
Is he?
He is great.
Maybe we could bring him to a meeting some night too.
Yeah, that's right. Bring him in.
Okay, the school start time subcommittee meeting minutes of March 30th, 2020. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Policy review subcommittee meeting minutes of March 23rd, 2022. Do I have a motion to approve those
So
minutes?
moved.
Are
Second.
those in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
And then the April 7th, 2020 meeting minutes of our school committee. May I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Second.
Abstain.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Any new business?
I have something I'd love to bring up quickly.
Yep.
I know everybody's tired, so I won't take too long, but I'm sure hopefully everyone has heard that, I think in April, the CDC released new data that gun violence became the #1 cause of death for kids in 2020. And it's interesting because during the pandemic, obviously, like, school shootings went down, but suicides went up. And we are also dealing with, a mental health crisis. So I thought it would be really neat if the community could come together to do something on gun violence prevention related to safe storage. So it's by no means an anti-gun initiative, but educating the community in terms of how to keep kids safe by making sure they don't get their hands on guns. Years ago, access to a gun was a higher risk for suicide than a mental health diagnosis. So I had a conversation, or I emailed back and forth with Danielle Sutton from Westwood Youth and Family Services, and she'd be interested in tackling this with us from the mental health perspective, and I thought maybe we could get in touch with Chief Silva and.
I did reach out to him.
Oh, you did?
And,
Super.
yes, and he would be happy to partner
Okay.
with us. Yep.
So there's a group, it's called Be Smart, and they do a presentation. I can send it to all of you to vet it and let me know what you think. But if Chief Silva has ideas, if Danielle does, we can all kind of collaborate. But I thought, to be clear, it's meant for parents. It's not meant for students at all. It would be an educational opportunity for parents.
Well, thank you, Amanda.
Great.
Any other new business for anybody? Next school committee meeting is scheduled June 9th at 7 p.m. in the Josepha Jowdy Theater. Our school committee member emeritus. Thank you, everybody, for coming. May I have a motion to close our meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you again, everybody.
Aye.
Thank you
Thanks.
for coming.